This week, we're talking about two very courageous women in the news, fighting two very different cultural battles. But they have one thing in common. They both had the guts to say no to what was wrong and speak truth. One is a basketball player standing for girls' sports. The other is a nurse who refused to abort. Neither of them expected to be at the center of a national firestorm. But in a woke culture that demands compliance, that's the fallout. Today, we're looking at both women and their battles and the price they've paid for speaking truth. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome, everyone. Glad to have you with us for another episode of Speak Up Virginia. And there's been a lot going on, but in our opener, we mentioned that there have been two very courageous women just who have continued to be in the news over and over the last few weeks. So we wanted to talk about both of these cases. But in particular, I wanted to start out with the one that has to do with transgenderism and girls' sports. I'm sure many of our listeners by now have heard of Sophie Cunningham, who is on the girls' basketball team, Indiana Fever. That's the same team as the famous Caitlin Clark. But I think Sophie might actually be getting a little more famous over the last few weeks for simply speaking truth. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, let me bring everybody up to speed. I mean, what we've got is the WNBA, which is the women's, same as NBA, the Women's National Basketball Association, is basically in this mess, imploding right now because basically one Christian player simply had the guts to make a simple statement about something that we all know to be true. So it's just really crazy. So because of all this, so Sophie Cunningham, and that's the one that you were mentioning, has now sort of become more famous almost than Caitlin Clark. She plays a guard for the Indiana Fever, and she basically just did this interview with ESPN. Now, she had held this view. This is not a new view for her. She has actually stated it in the past, but it has recently kicked back up again because she did an interview. And here's her actual quote. She says, "I think that I am here to extend love, but I also think with that love is truth, being honest. And I want to protect young girls in a locker room or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men." So here it is, the big issue, transgenderism, and how does that impact sports? Yeah. And she dared to say it. And really, ever since then, it's kind of been weeks of controversy and demonstrations and all sorts of things.
I mean, just for context, this was a really long interview because I went back and looked at this.
This was not like the point of the interview. Line. This was not right. That's exactly right.
Pretty benign talking about loving people, but yeah, I think girls should be protected in their sport. I mean, but even so, it's like they just couldn't handle it. The woke media, the WNBA itself just couldn't handle it. And, just right after that, she got swarmed by reporters.
Right. They want to hear more. They want to juice up the controversial statement. So, and basically, she didn't back down, which I really appreciate. She said, "I said what I said." Yeah. And she called it common sense. Yeah. So maybe let's listen to that particular interview real quick.
And you talked about wanting to protect young girls who shouldn't have to go against biological men. Just can you expand your viewpoint on that?
I mean, I think I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children. And that's little girls who are also involved in that category. And so I stand on what I said, and I always believe that.
Yeah. Do you see your advocacy on that, like taking any form going forward?
I don't know. I'm not a very political person, but I do have beliefs. I have morals, and I'll always stand on those and be true to who I am. And I think people are going to take it how they want to take it, but I've never even really said anything about that. And so when it comes just to protecting young girls in sport and women in sport, I feel very strongly about that. I think that's why you have Title IX. That's why you have some of the greats in women's sports. If Title IX and women's sports weren't protected, then you wouldn't hear about any type of women in sport. And so I think in the future, it's just really important to protect.
Well, I absolutely love how she doubled down. And also, she made an important point that this affects little girls as well.
Yeah,
this whole issue.
She's not saying anything that others haven't said. But again, in the context of the WNBA, this is a big deal because the WNBA has been known to be pretty woke and a lot of the players to be publicly very left-leaning. And so I think it creates this thing. But she isn't trying to poke anybody in the, she's not trying to be difficult. She's just saying, this is what I believe. And there's other places where she'll say, this is just, something that I do think is important. I am not going to back away from my views is basically it.
I mean, they asked her and she answered.
Right. I mean, they're asking the question.
Yeah. And you got to hand it to her because other people have been asked this and she's kind of hanging out there to dry herself, not backing down. So we've seen this has had fallout where she's gotten booed at games and everything. Talk to us about the courage she's showing.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that she is now sort of this controversial figure, not for basketball playing, but simply for her views. And, I mean, I would say this. Yes, she's been booed. I think in the big one that people really saw was in Minneapolis. The opposing head coach actually wore a jacket, a shirt under her jacket. That's what it was, a shirt under her jacket. And it said, "Trans kids belong." It was kind of like, I'm going to make this point on national television in opposition. And it was the night that the Fever played them. And, it is what it is. But then there was also the one, and this one also got a lot of attention, where one of the owners of the Seattle team reacted because there are now kind of kids coming to support Sophie. Yeah. So there are actually girls showing up at games wearing shirts that say, XXXY or, some kind of supportive statement of Sophie. And the owner of the Seattle team actually cursed out these two teenage girls that were on the sidelines. And all it was they're supporting Sophie. So, I mean, we're kind of seeing this very political basketball games.
I mean, it's really fascinating how she gets all this backlash just for answering a question that's not even the main point of the interview. Yeah. But it's a coach. It's a
Now the coach did get in trouble. We do need to say the coach did get
the co-owner.
Oh, it wasn't. Yeah. I mean, the co-owner did at least get in trouble. They were suspended from coming to the next 5 home games. So I do want to
curse people.
I do want to at least say that they did come down the right side of not cursing out teenage girls. I mean, that seems like a really easy one, but it keeps going.
But even the actual coach that on the opposing team that wore the shirt,
she should have gotten in trouble.
I mean, she's injecting that into the conversation. So where's all the backlash at that? And apparently that's okay.
Well, it reminds you of the Pride nights where all the players are supposed to wear rainbows, but if somebody wears a Bible verse, it's a whole, I mean, we've had these sports things have just become such an ordeal.
Well, it's really fascinating because you've just got all points now. I mean, you have the cancel culture play now and everything. And so this just keeps going. It is the story that won't quit for WNBA. And so I wanted to mention also there was another Georgia mom and her daughter, and they paid bazooka dollars to be courtside.
These are not cheap games.
Yeah. And they were wearing the shirts with the XXXY, which is...
It's actually a brand also.
Yeah, it's a way to show chromosomes, DNA, biological woman, is what they're saying. So they went through almost the whole game. They're in overtime, and the poor security guard that was probably made to do this came over, told them, you have to cover up those shirts. Here's a shirt, put this on.
The idea that you'd have to cover a shirt, I mean... Do you go to sporting events? Do you see what people wear? And they're worried about covering up an XXXY t-shirt. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling when you actually see what is allowed and perfectly acceptable in it just, So
that's what I'm saying. Well, let's just listen to that mom and daughter talking a little bit.
We're made to cover up our XXXY shirts at this game.
Wait, are you serious?
Yes. They gave us shirts. They gave us T-shirts during overtime and told us we had to leave.
And this is for the girls.
Or cover our shirts. And we did nothing. We were just sitting there. I didn't make signs.
Well, as I was saying, it does seem interesting that this just seems to have become like a combustion of everything, in our society with woke culture, because you've got the cancel culture with trying to censor T-shirts. You've got the whole WNBA now can't define what a woman is. Like, people are in consternation over how do we define what the word woman means in our actual policy. It's just really gotten to an absurd level, but it affects real women.
Yeah,
is the problem.
I think what's great though is that in the middle of all this, you do have somebody like Sophie who's coming out and being telling the truth. And actually, lately, she's really been, I think, modeling so well, just sort of a I think, a graceful way to share what you believe. In fact, she even has recently posted about how she's been baptized recently. She decided to get rebaptized as an adult. I mean, she's just kind of living her faith out loud a little bit more. And I think that's great, given so many people are watching her right now and these young girls are paying attention. But she just said, look, I felt a tug on my heart to get baptized again. And so, I mean, I think that's just being honest about who you are, and you should be comfortable to do that, right? We shouldn't have to set our faith, leave our faith at home when we go to, we'll say, the marketplace, the business place, or in this case, the sports arena.
Which is interesting you say that, because in another interview, she talked about there are other believers in this sport, in WNBA, but apparently they do a lot of self-censoring. So I'm just going to actually read from this quote. She says, quote, "There's a lot more believers than you would actually expect because a lot of people don't speak out about it. I think our league, they want to have a certain look to them. They want to have a certain style to them. And if you speak out against it, sometimes they just want to hush you, but that's not what I'm here for." So.
Good for her. But I mean, that's real. I mean, I'm sure that's true. I think that's true in every arena where just there's a lot of Christians that aren't speaking out.
Well, why do you think in the WNBA in particular, she would speak to this kind of pressure where there's one lifestyle where hey, hush up, whether it's believing that girls' sports should be for girls, not transgender biological men, or whether kind of not speaking real loud about your faith?
Well, I mean, I think the WNBA has been particularly woke. I mean, I think there's certain sports, actual leagues that have been known to be woke, and I think that's not helpful. I also think there's a lot of very public people that are part of the LGBTQ, they would identify with that, that are players that are very public about that in the WNBA. And imagine you're on teams with these folks, you're in locker rooms, you're on planes, you live with your team. I mean, so I think it is something that requires a real significant courage to be willing to do that. And you've got to do it well to keep those relationships, right? Like, you want to be truthful and you want to still have good relations with your teammates. And so I think sports teams can be a particularly hard place because it's not just I go to work and I go home. It really is such an intimate connection that you have to have with the people around you.
Well, I have been seeing some criticism out there that when Caitlin Clark got asked the same question, she wasn't willing to stick her neck out. And I don't know what her personal views are, but it does just make you wonder when you look at the women that have really spoken out, that are in the sports world, like Riley Gaines and now Sophie Cunningham. There does seem to be a faith element that gives them more courage, right?
I do think that. And when Caitlin was a little bit more passive about this, I was kind of bummed because I feel like Sophie was first known for sticking up for Caitlin when they were picking on Caitlin, not necessarily about this issue, but just Caitlin took a lot of heat for being so good, and she happens to be in the minority in a lot of ways in this league, and she really took a lot of heat and was almost kind of getting beaten up on the floor. And Sophie was really defending her, so I was kind of hoping Caitlin would sort of defend Sophie in this way and be a little bit stronger. But again, I don't know these people. We don't know.
Well, it kind of adds to the sense that on this issue, she seems to be hanging out there in courage alone.
Yeah.
Especially when her coach, their own coach, got the question.
Yeah, I think that's actually almost tragic. And their coach's answer reminds us very much of a moment I think a lot of people remember when Ketanji Brown Jackson was dealt with this question. And you might remember at the Supreme Court, she said she wasn't a scientist, so she couldn't define a woman. That's kind of what I think the coach's answer sounds like.
It was eerily similar. Let's just listen to that coach's response.
Stance on men or athletes who test as biological male participating in women's sports. What's your personal stance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would say that I'm educated enough from a scientific standpoint. I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer. I just don't. I do think, when we think about various levels of sport, various governing bodies of sport and things that go into that, like I said, I'm not educated enough at the different levels. I know growing up, I played with the boys all the time.
So
there weren't girl sports.
Would you welcome a biological male in WNBA?
Again, it's like, I don't know, when we talk about biological male and scientifically where we are, I think it's a totally different scenario. As I said, I'm not educated enough in terms of transgender and transitioning to give you a smart answer.
I think these coaches really have to understand that this is not something they can ignore or be mild about, because it does affect so many women. A report at the UN found that by 2024, over 600 female athletes in more than 400 competitions had lost more than, get this, 890 medals in 29 different sports. This is not like a one-off anymore. This is a lot of people impacted. And so I feel like these coaches should be defending their players and what they have that is unique and special on a women's team.
Yeah, I mean, and this is coming out of people associated with the UN researchers. It's not like they're known as conservatives, you know? So I think these stats are interesting because you always hear people trying to sideline
Minimize
and say,
it.
yeah, oh, it's just a small percentage. No one's really getting hurt. And they just can't continue to.
I mean, our legislature did that when Riley Gaines was standing in front of them saying I was sidelined, and they were going, oh, it's a solution in search of a problem. There's not a real. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the only thing they can do, though, because the rational person knows this is ridiculous. And so sidelining and making it seem like, we're picking on some tiny little issue that isn't real is the defensive mechanism for them.
And I got to mention another stat here that I found fascinating. UCLA Law School study estimated 122,000 transgender youth, is how they put it, could be participating in high school level athletics. So again, that's not a minimal amount of girls impacted.
And I just want to remind everybody, high school athletics lead to college scholarships. And as a parent, many parents really hope their children get that scholarship, because that's about going to college and paying tuition. So there's real money on the line in some cases.
Well, this story continues to unfold in the craziest ways. And I think the reason we continue to see these bizarre things happening is because the WNBA itself has a totally inconsistent stance. They, when they look at their own policy and it refers to women, and they can't define women, it's really leaving them in a no-win situation. So now we have this development where there are some courageous men speaking out and essentially calling the league's bluff. Victoria, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, we now have this player who was in the NBA for 11 years. His name is Enes Kanter Freedom, and he has basically come out and said, hey, I've looked at the league's rules, I've looked at their policy, their eligibility guidelines, and I'm going to declare myself a woman, and I want to be seen as a WNBA prospect. I want to get brought onto a team. And so he came out, and then hours later, another one, Royce White, a 6'8" former NBA first-round pick, announced that he was going to do the same thing. So we got these two guys, and they're saying, look, if you can't define it, or it's, that it's unclear, that I'm going to jump in.
And they're basically citing the rules back to them. Yeah. So it's something listening to these almost 7-foot men declare this. So we're just going to play this for you, both of their statements back to back.
After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in May 2027. I am definitely not here to mock, make fun of, or disrespect any community or personal choices. I am simply asking that the current rules be applied equally to everyone. The rules that represent the very values many WNBA players and coaches have publicly advocated for. My team and I are prepared to ensure these guidelines are applied equally, consistently, and without exception. And I look forward to the WNBA honoring its stated principles. See you at training camp.
Earlier this week, I made the announcement. I'm transgender. I'm a woman. I identify as sometimes identifying as a woman for purposes of basketball, professional basketball. So I'll be declaring for the WNBA draft in 2027 as well. I think I'd be unstoppable. But I'm a team first guy. I'm a pass first kind of player. I do the little things. I led my team in all 5 major stat categories at Iowa State University. So I do a little bit of everything. I'll do whatever the coach needs me to do. I'll do whatever the girls need me to do.
Well, I love him saying there, I'll do whatever the girls need, but Victoria, they are trying to make a serious point. I mean, they are doing this to make a point. But it is exposing something real.
Well, this is the thing. They might be doing it to make a point, but it is legitimate, meaning if they wanted to, if there is no definition, if there is no biology involved, they can, in fact, sign up and attempt to try out for a team. And there's no reason they wouldn't. I mean, we know, I hate to say it, but we know that they would immediately take a female spot. They're taller. They've been, they've already played in the NBA. And so there's a real reality here. So yes, they're doing it to just up the discussion, I think, in a very dramatic way. But the problem is the NBA can't, the WNBA doesn't know how to react. They don't know what to do. In fact, I think they came together.
Yeah. Well, as Cantor put it, rules are rules. So they're totally quoting their own rules back to them. I just want to mention one thing Cantor put out in a post, Cantor Freedom, because he says, he points out, I think this is important, Victoria, that G League players, first he starts, I'm talking to people that will declare for this.
Right.
More than just us. They're ready to do this. And he's saying, hear me out, G League, NBA G League pays players $45K a year, but the top WNBA top players earn $1.4 million. So that's an easy way for lesser qualified men, to make a lot more. Just identifying as women. Rules are rules, as he says.
I mean, it's legitimate. I mean, that's a lot of money on the line, and we know these guys would be drafted. We know that they would get on the team, and $1.3 million extra. I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, why wouldn't they? Also, I mean, it's a sport you love, and I honestly could see some who actually leave the NBA who don't end up going on to G League coming back to play for the women. So, I mean, I think there's a reality that says if you don't fix these rules, people are going to take advantage of them. That's always the issue. It's not even just that the policies are bad because they harm people. It's also because people take advantage of them.
They do. I mean, we've seen this in girls' locker rooms in schools. We've seen this in the prison system. We have seen, even if they are living under this lie that they are a woman, we have seen men that performed much lesser in other sports, whether it's track and field or swimming, come and take titles away from women. So it's not a hypothetical.
No, and the problem is what do you have to stop them? If there is no definition, you really have no ability to stop them. So it feels like one of our inconceivable segments that we used to do because it's so ridiculous. But this actually put the league between a rock and a hard spot. These guys actually did file the paperwork. These two to
so they
declare.
Have to respond.
Yeah, so the league has to do something because they've read their own rule book back to them. And where it goes from here is actually funny because again, what's humorous about this is the WNBA basically convened its leadership. I guess it was presidents and general managers and the commissioner, and they were, I guess, trying to work out what a woman is.
Well, yeah, because it says you have to be a woman to be eligible, and so then what is a woman? So they have to dive into that. Again, this is in their title, Women's National, Basketball Association. So I would think that would impact the integrity of everything that they are, why they exist. So it's in their name. They're trying to define the word that's in their own name. But Victoria, what is the real reason, if you could kind of boil this down for us, why they're having so much trouble defining the word in their own name? And, why can't they publicly state? Because I'm jumping ahead here, but we should mention that they met for several days.
They couldn't come up with it. They didn't solve it. That's the funniest part.
They had to announce that they couldn't agree. Yeah.
And so the real reason they can't agree, I mean, let's just all be honest. They know what the biology is. They know the issues of transgenderism. What they are doing is they have to placate. They have a base. They have individuals in the league. They have a left-wing ideology that they have to hold up higher than real science. And so the politics and the ideology are getting out in front of what everybody knows to be true, and more people are willing to say it. So it's going to get more and more uncomfortable for them to keep putting the ideology and the politics ahead of the safety of their own players, ahead of, the actual concept that the entire league was created on, was to be a different league than men's basketball. That was the point. That's why we have a WNBA.
Yeah. And just all this flack, even before all this started with Caitlin, just even almost getting persecuted for being a good player. Yeah. And then now this flack on Sophie for stating the truth. It almost feels like they are sawing off their own leg in the women's sport. How can they possibly keep going? Because they were starting to turn a profit for the first time in ages, right?
Because of these girls, because of Caitlin Clark originally, and Sophie's just building more attention to it. I mean, I hate to say it, but yeah, they're doing better than it's done in a very long time, and they're basically pushing back on it. And what's crazy about it is, I mean, let's look at where this issue is really going, because if you just look at it from a business perspective, a New York Times survey recently found that 79% of Americans say that males who identify as women should not compete in women's sports. So this has turned, and even among Democrats, so even if we look at this sort of like left, right, or two different parties, Democrats, 67%. Are agreeing with us that there is a difference, and so they're siding against their own audience, because that puts you in a very small bucket that you're having to placate.
And that is the problem, as you say, with putting ideology above everything, safety, your audience business, even biological truth. So if we don't come out of this, are we going to see the end of national women's basketball at this professional level?
Well, it just begs the question, why then have two separate leagues?
Yeah.
If there truly is no woman in woman, then let's just have one league and let's see how that goes. I don't think people are going to enjoy that. I don't think that women are going to have a place to play. I think that men will always be taller and typically stronger and all the things. And we'll just end up with,
It really does put them in a bind, because they keep saying, I don't believe that. Some of the coaches and officials keep going out there saying we don't believe in exclusion.
Right.
But you have to exclude at some level to not have bad players in there. So
it's just funny. People use this word exclusion because it has this negative connotation, but categories constantly exclude people by the sheer nature. All of Title IX is exclusionary. The entire purpose of it was created to exclude men. That's why I was there, was to say, let's give women an opportunity, even if, yes, it does exclude men. How mean is that? No, it's not mean. It was giving women an opportunity because they weren't getting an opportunity prior to having separate women's sports. So exclusion is actually the thing that allows these women to play and give them what they need.
Well, if you're going to exclude with people's quality as a player but not exclude men, then you have lost any basis for exclusion whatsoever, because you have no standards. So I just don't know how they can continue like that. But that's why Sophie was making the point you're making. She said also, that's why you have Title IX. That's why you have some of the greats in women's sports. And if you don't have Title IX, you don't have any of that. So
it just literally goes away if you're not exclusionary.
All right. Well, I guess the hopeful note on this is that courage is contagious.
Yes.
It just took one very courageous basketball player to kind of force us to look at all this. So I hope, hopefully that will continue and more people will speak out and we will not see women's sports continue to be eroded. What's your last word on that?
Yeah, I hope we see more little girls on the sidelines wearing T-shirts and standing up, and just, the courage is definitely contagious. And I hope we all kind of support the players that are out there standing up for these things.
All right, well, let's turn to the other woman that we mentioned at the front end who's also involved in a huge battle. But this is in a different arena, and that is the other big battle that we're facing in our culture, and that's over the sanctity of human life. This is about what happens when someone refuses to end a life, despite what they say about my body, my choice. That is not what's happening here. But this is the whole Baby Gabriel story. You may have heard about it if you've been paying attention to the news on the life issues. It's been all over the news the last few weeks. But I think it really tells us what's going on in our culture when it comes to two main things, and that is the combination of this trend to commercialize babies combined with a total disregard for the sanctity of human life. You end up with this mess that we're looking at. Will you bring us up to speed?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is this is about a surrogacy situation. So you have this woman, a surrogate mother. Her name's McKenna West, and she's a nurse in Alaska. She's a single mom, already of 2 kids, and she's carrying a child for a California couple. And I think there was something like $60,000 involved in the transaction. So she's being paid to bring this baby into the world. And the contract had an abortion clause. And so what this is it basically, in the contract of I'm going to carry your baby, it says something like, if something turned up wrong in the diagnosis of the unborn baby, if something, during the pregnancy was found to be wrong, they could tell her to end the pregnancy. So around 20 weeks, something did actually come up, and there was a serious heart defect discovered. And so what's interesting about this is serious, but treatable. So this wasn't a situation, where we knew this child was going to die at some point. We knew that it is possible to treat it. 3 surgeries are typically what happens, one right after birth. And then with good care, most of these babies do actually go home. But that's the scenario that sort of teed this all up. And so basically, she was supposed to have an abortion because this is what came up. And interestingly enough, no provider in Alaska could do that at this late of a point in the pregnancy.
Yeah, because we're looking at around 5 months.
Yeah. This is a very well-developed baby. And so the appointment was actually scheduled in Seattle, which is, your next closest place, although not close, not convenient. But she didn't go. So there was an appointment and she doesn't go. And she instead decides to start calling hospitals. And she found one in Dallas with an extraordinary record on this exact defect. So she instead got on a plane to Dallas.
Yeah.
So for 2 reasons. 1, for the hospital, and 2, because Texas has a protection of human life law.
Mm-hmm.
And so she heads to Dallas. And basically a day before the birth, the attorney general got involved because they literally got a court order that this baby is going to get the care it needs. Nobody's going to delay it. Nobody's going to move the child out of state or the mom out of state before the child's born. And then the child's born August 12th in Texas and came through the first surgery. So she was right. It was treatable. And that's being handled as we speak.
Yeah, and the good news is, as you say, the baby is alive. It's a fascinating case. Let me just back up. I think there's more and more women that are feeling economic pressure. We mentioned she's a single mom, and this is touted to them as something that, can help you get the income you need. And so I do think there are women that maybe haven't thought out the full ramifications of what this is going to be like.
I don't think anybody could possibly know what it would be like to be a surrogate until you do it. I mean, even if you've been pregnant before, you're now carrying a baby under contract that you're going to give away. Yeah. I got to think there's a lot of women that see the possibility for financial gain. And to your point, just aren't prepared for what they're actually going to go through.
You can see that in these really heartbreaking interviews that she has done. The mom that was carrying McKenna, she's talking about, I start feeling the baby move. I feel bonded now, and I just couldn't do it. She talks about how she wrestled for 2 weeks over this. So this is really fascinating when you look at the realities. If it is a human life in the womb, it combined with that we've kind of commodified this process. But just to back up, so the baby is alive, good news, but apparently with the legal parents, because under the law, I'm assuming like most of these are working now, they contributed the sperm and the egg and it's implanted. And so they're the legal parents. So you got this ironic situation where apparently the ones that were wanting her to initially get an abortion, now they're the legal parents.
I mean, at least they changed their mind and they want this child. I mean, I'll give them that. But I think I just have to say, the whole thing just reminds us why surrogacy is such a disaster. I mean, this is not as it was intended. And I think the idea, because to your point, it creates a market and it creates a cost for human life and a value to human life, and a value that, as we can see in this situation, is affected by how perfect it is. I mean, it's a disaster.
Yeah. Well, I'll just mention the weird thing too is before this kid was even born, the parents had filed suit against McKenna, and it's quite a lot. It looks like at least $100,000 for allegedly breaching their surrogacy contract. They have unspecified damages over what they call malicious, outrageous conduct. There's a lot of back and forth in this. I don't know exactly what it all is, but I hope the malicious does not refer to actually having the child. So,
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, that reminds me of when, there have been lawsuits around an individual that the parent wanted to abort. And this is
happening more and more.
It's pretty tragic. I mean, just imagine this child, by the way, will grow up knowing that there was an intent to abort them. And now there's a lawsuit around. I mean, that child will eventually know all this. Yeah. That's pretty tragic.
Well, McKenna says, just looking at some of these interviews, and I encourage you to look at some of her words too. She says she realized, well, first she said, after careful thought, I've decided that I cannot terminate this pregnancy. The baby is in my body and I care for him very much. And then she went on to say, this truly goes against everything I do in my life, from my motherhood to my career, which is a nurse, protecting life, not ending it. And there was also some information that she had come to know some people with the same heart condition that had obviously survived. So, but what's really interesting here is that she changed her view on surrogacy because she told Live Action, quote, it has been very degrading as a woman, and I felt extremely objectified, like I was just someone purchased. She went on to say, and it felt like, and they get to make all these decisions that are going to affect me for the rest of my life, trying to force an abortion. So she's saying she felt that pressure. And she says, I wouldn't have signed up for something like this, if I knew what I knew now.
So I just don't think people realize what surrogacy really is when you really think about it. And it isn't always, just to inform our audience, surrogacy is not always that the couple contributes to the sperm and the egg. It can actually be, you go out and purchase sperm, you go out and purchase egg, you put them together. I mean, it can be an entirely, I'll call it a scientific project because not created. I mean, it could be completely genetically separated from the parents who will be their legal guardian. So I don't know what the details were on this particular situation, but there's something that happens between a mom and a baby when a baby is in the womb. That's real. In fact, there's blood exchange. I mean, like there's actual physical things that happen where the two become connected in ways that I don't even know that we knew years ago, but it is just remarkable how God designed that process. And so the idea that a woman is going to carry a baby that she has no intention to ever raise because it's been literally given to her in contract. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing that anybody ever thought this was a good idea in any direction. And I'm glad that she has, in fact, changed her perspective on it. Yeah.
And I do think people can ask, well, why did she sign it then? But I think she has explained kind of this is how my thinking changed in that process, And I think it does get to the problem of when you start treating these situations like children or something that you order.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. I mean, they are not a product. They are not something that you just, and unfortunately, Virginia's surrogacy law is so bad that you can. I mean, it's literally like, I want to create a designer baby. I want to go find, blue eyes and brown hair. And I mean, you literally could do that and you're designing something, and paying for it. I mean, the idea that human life would ever be treated like that is to say that there is better and worse life, that there is more valuable and less valuable. And we've lost the entire idea that the image of God is stamped on every human being. We've lost the entire idea that every life is valuable, that every life has purpose. And we're creating them in a science lab, essentially.
Yeah. And, because now they're talking about maybe we're going to have not even need the woman's womb.
Oh, I can't even imagine if we get to the point where we're creating like an artificial womb.
Yeah.
I mean, it's stunning.
And I think it's a real thing when you start treating children like a market, because what happens when they're so-called defective? Can you just cancel the order, which is actually canceling a human life? That's the problem. So when you start treating a child as a product, it does mean that you're treating life conditionally.
Yeah,
right?
And I think in this case, the contract kind of basically came with a warranty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like I purchased something and there's this warranty that if it's not right, I'm going to be able to send it back, except sending it back in the case of a human life is killing it. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah. You essentially have this kill switch written in there. And I'm fascinated by, I know the criticism that's out there. Well, she signed a contract and all that, but she has explained kind of what was happening in her mind and heart. But I'm fascinated by these people that make these Handmaid's Tale comparisons of incubators. And here you have a woman really being treated like an incubator. And then also what happens to the my choice, my body, my choice. That clearly, they don't believe that when it comes to her body.
Yeah, they clearly don't allow the surrogate to be in control. And I will just make a note. In Virginia, this was a huge battle in Virginia. We actually worked very hard to try to not allow contracts. So we put into our code something that would not allow contracts that would require someone to have an abortion. And this happened. It finally went into code in 2022. But The only way we got it in, because we had liberal Democrats, is they added that the surrogate could abort if the surrogate decided. So basically the total control in our state is with the surrogate, which I think is better than with the contracted couple. Forcing someone to have an abortion is never acceptable. So it's better than it could have been. Governor Youngkin actually tried to amend it to get rid of that the surrogate couldn't decide to have an abortion, that basically life always prevailed. But we couldn't get it through with life over always prevailing. But at least this situation that happened to her could not happen in Virginia, because you can't have a contract that requires an abortion. So there's, at least some states that it's like the only good thing we have in our entire code about surrogacy. Everything else is terrible.
Okay, side note. Yeah. I will say, so surrogacy is in the Bible, but even there, it doesn't seem to turn out too well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct. It was not the intended method. It wasn't, this is not as God
caused all kinds of interesting family dynamics that were not
pleasant. As God prescribed, for sure.
But he used it. He used those situations, and I'm sure this will be used in this child's life for good.
Oh yeah, no question. God always makes beauty out of ashes, but that doesn't mean that this is as it should be intended.
Well, I can't resist wrapping up just kind of with this article in the Federalist that really stuck with me. The author is Joshua Monington. And it really grabbed me because he said it's shocking but an obvious reality that an unborn baby in America might be better off as a puppy in a lot of cases. And he compared it to this baby acquisition process as becoming a lot more like shopping for a golden doodle. Well, hey, did this one we picked out pass the vet check? It's the wrong color. Except they don't have the shop put the puppy down, though, when it doesn't work out. But, you just picked out a puppy.
Yeah, I was going to say that is what the puppy process is. We actually did just do a Bernie doodle, not a golden doodle, but pretty similar. And it is. You're choosing color. You're choosing how big. You're basically, there's a litter and you're sort of, but to your point, you're not putting down the other puppy. Someone else is going to adopt those. They're all going to be up for adoption. Someone else is going to adopt those other puppies. You're right. It is actually worse. He's right. I guess the author of this article, he's right that if a puppy is not bought, you walk away. But if this baby is not perfect, they're asking for it to be killed.
Just on so many levels, we're getting to where we treat pets better in a lot of ways than children.
No question.
But that's a whole different conversation. Well, Victoria, this baby is alive in a lot of ways because of a state line, because of where the mom that was having the baby went to have the child. Geography very likely decided whether he was going to be alive. So can you tie that for us? I know you're saying we have a law that's a little bit different, but how would you connect that in people's minds to this amendment that we have on the ballot in November?
I think it just reminds people how important it is that abortion law now really does rest with the state. And that means that it's our responsibility as Virginians to protect our state policy. And so I think in this moment where we are going to have an amendment coming to our ballot and we're going to have a yes or no question about, do we want more extreme abortion, more abortion than the 39,000, almost 40,000 abortions we had last year? Do we want more? I think there's a very clear no, we do not want more. And we need to be advocates for that because, again, these lives are precious. This child is going to grow up and we're going to get to see that child live a wonderful, fruitful life that would not have been possible but for the state of Texas having a solid policy and this mom having the guts to get herself to Texas. So hats off to Texas. We want to be more like you someday on our abortion policy.
Yes. Well, in the meantime, let's at least try not to have where we become the state that everyone goes to have late-term abortions and have no protections, even for babies, that are born alive. And let's not go to a level of barbarism in Virginia. So to that end, please go to our website, familyfoundation.org. Please avail yourself of the resources that are on there, especially the red liner on the abortion amendment. We now have a video out that you can share with your pastor that's made directly to speak to pastors and church members. We've got all kinds of new resources on there, so make sure you check it out. Again, that's familyfoundation.org. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you share this episode, and we'll see you next time. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together.